Now this, by the way, the White House insisting that it is putting the U.S. first when it comes to the border. It comes after the president of Mexico said that the flow of migrants will continue if the U.S. doesn't meet his demands on migration. He's calling the shots. Tomi Lahren joins us this morning. Tomi, is this just an empty promise from the White House to put the U.S. first? Because I haven't seen any evidence of that.
You know, I'm not sure the White House understands what it means to put Americans first, because if putting Americans first is allowing 10 million, probably more, illegal aliens into your country, unvetted, undocumented, putting them into your cities, spending millions of billions of dollars on them, if that is what their definition of putting America first is, boy, I'm not so sure they're grasping that definition. But the fact that Mexico is so emboldened and so entitled to make demands of the United States is such a stark contrast from the Trump administration when he told Mexico how the game was going to go. And he told Mexico, President Donald Trump did, that if they weren't willing to cooperate, if they weren't willing to police their own border, that he would slap a tariff on their country. And lo and behold, it worked. Mexico had to cooperate. Their Mexican military had to work to do their part. And that's why you saw apprehensions go down drastically. So if this administration wants to put America first, I would just go back and see what Donald Trump did and emulate that to the T.
Yeah, and you know, we have veterans sleeping on the street while we give illegal aliens boarding, we give them food, we give them debit cards to go out and spend. That's not America first. But I want to move on to this, Tomi. Iconic sports analyst Stephen A. Smith, he's definitely frustrated with the Democrats for not replacing Biden. Listen to this. I'll get your comment.
I find myself ashamed of the Democratic Party for their lack of a competitive fervor. You had since 2016 to come up with somebody else, and you still can't do it. That is pathetic. I'm the kind of person that might vote for the president being a Democrat and every other position Republican. Every senator, every congressional figure, every local.
Yeah, he's frustrated. Yeah, but Smith says, look, he's also leaning towards voting for Biden. But what do you make of that, Tomi?
What's really wild to me is that there are prominent voices on the left that know what a horrific job this president is doing, but they would still vote for him anyway. They would vote for other Republicans, but they would not vote for Donald Trump simply because they don't like Donald Trump. They don't like his character. They don't like his bravado. But when you look at the state of your country, sometimes you have to put personality aside and you have to vote for what works. So whereas I'm happy to see that there are some Democrats waking up and willing to admit how horrible things are, if they're still saying they're going to hold their nose and vote for Biden, that's concerning to me. But what should be concerning to the Biden campaign is RFK Jr., because a lot of those folks would rather vote for nobody or vote for RFK rather than vote for Biden or Trump, and that's only going to pull away from Biden. So they better be shaking in their orthopedic sneakers.
Orthopedic sneakers. You know, Smith also said that he might vote for Republicans in other government offices. Do you think we could see a lot of that split ticket voting this time around?
I would hope that there would be people that would be willing to look at their state and local races and understand that Republicans are going to get things done, because Republicans do get things done, and red states are faring much better than blue states. Whether that's going to be a down ballot vote or whether Republicans are going to be able to pick up enough to make a difference, that remains to be seen. But boy, we'll take it where we can get it.
Exactly. I want to get into this one, Tomi. And we've been talking about it this morning. Donald Trump paying his respects to the family of an NYPD officer that was killed in the line of duty. Trump says President Biden didn't even call the family. Watch this.
I think that politically he can't support the police. I think he's also making a mistake. But I think politically his base won't let him support the police. And I support the police, I would say, at the highest level of any president by far, maybe double or triple. And they knew that. That's why when I walked into that funeral parlor, it was like love. It was just, they want to shy away from it. They didn't even call the family. They could have called. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know. Even a call would be perhaps, I'm not sure they'd take his call.
And you know, it's interesting, of course, Tomi, Joe Biden was at this glitzy New York fundraiser yesterday at the very same time. What a stark contrast.
Really a tale of two leaders, or I guess in Biden's case, a lack thereof leadership. You know, one thing that I think all Americans can say about Donald Trump is that there's no question if he supports our law enforcement officers. And in a time when there is indeed a war on cops, somebody who's running for president and a former president standing there shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement officers, not only with the family of the fallen, but just shoulder to shoulder with those that are still going out every day, sacrificing their lives, risking their lives. Unfortunately, for some folks in this country that are ungrateful, that really says a lot about Donald Trump. You know, he's got a lot going on, too, because the Democrats have mired him in all this lawfare, but he still was able to show up yesterday, stand with the family, and say something from the bottom of his heart. That's more than Joe Biden could do surrounded by celebrities. It's a big contrast, and it's one that the American people are certainly taking note of today.
Very well put. Tomi Lahren, great stuff. Thank you for joining us this morning on this Good Friday. Always good. Thank you.
Good to see you.